Have you ever been, say, just walking down the aisle in a grocery store, or maybe you're sitting in your car stuck in traffic, and suddenly a specific song comes on the radio? And I mean instantly. You are almost violently transported back in time. You can practically smell the air from a specific summer, or feel the exact emotion of a moment from a decade ago. We've all been there, right? Music has this absolutely uncanny, deeply neurological ability to anchor itself to our memories. Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are exploring a truly fascinating concept that takes that everyday, relatable phenomenon and just pushes it to its absolute logical limits. We are looking at the idea of using music not just as some casual background noise for your morning workout or your daily commute. No, we are looking at music being used as a rigid, structural blueprint for a person's entire life journey. We're going to unpack a deeply personal source text today that literally maps out a life using a specific, meticulously curated playlist. The author of this text calls it the Chronicle of Liberation. Now, to put this in perspective, imagine an auditory architecture consisting of a massive 33-track master manifesto. It's huge. But then, that massive playlist is subsequently broken down into highly distinct 11-track segments. Today, we are going completely under the hood to examine one of these specific 11-track segments. It is a profoundly deliberate, incredibly thoughtful way to document personal history. We are talking about moving from the raw, messy pain of family trauma right through the chaotic, restless energy of self-discovery, all the way to the ultimate building of a massive international cultural network. It's an approach that takes all those highly abstract, messy, confusing feelings of growing up and anchors them to very specific beats, very specific melodies, and lyrics. It literally turns a simple, everyday playlist into a vivid, structural blueprint of human transformation. It's a wild concept, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. The central question we are exploring here is incredibly ambitious, and you have to ask yourself, can a playlist truly map a person's entire life, like actually map it? Can a carefully chosen sequence of songs accurately chart the turbulent waters of childhood trauma, the restless, often overwhelming constant energy of ADHD, and then shift all the way to the expansive reach of global activism? Well, the source material we are unpacking today argues with a resounding, undeniable yes. But getting there, understanding that yes, requires us to completely rethink how we listen to a playlist. Think about it. Usually, what do? We just hit shuffle on Spotify, right? Or maybe we passively let the app move from track 1 to track 2 while we're doing the dishes or answering emails. It's purely ambient. But here, the author has created a rigorous, almost mathematical framework where every single song represents a highly specific life phase. Every track is tied to a specific emotional hurdle or a massive personal revelation. By assigning such profound, heavy personal meaning to these specific tracks, the author is using music as a literal cartography of the soul. It becomes a map. And as you'll see, it's a map that guides us through their most difficult, isolated moments in the past and points directly, intentionally, toward a highly visionary future. To truly grasp how this ambitious mapping actually works in practice, we really have to look closely at this core quote, which comes directly from the text. This manifesto is not a linear sequence, but an interlocking system of reflections. Now, what does that actually mean? It means the author didn't just casually list a bunch of songs in chronological order based on what year they came out. Not at all. They designed this auditory architecture as a highly complex system of mirrors. It is incredibly, rigidly structured. So in this 11-track segment, track 1 mirrors track 11, track 2 mirrors track 10, track 3 mirrors track 9, and so on, folding in on itself. Let me give you an example to make this concrete. Consider track 2. It's a song by Safri Duo. If you know Safri Duo, you know they're famous for this highly upbeat, bouncy, bongo-heavy trance music. The author associates this specific track with dancing on a bed as a child with their brother, just pure, unburdened, unfiltered nostalgia. But then, look at its structural counterpart, track 10. That's a track by an artist named Woodkid, and Woodkid sounds vastly different. Woodkid is known for dramatic, cinematic, sweeping orchestral horns. It sounds like a movie trailer. This track represents a powerful, ambitious sprint into the future, actively, aggressively leaving the burdens of the past behind. Or take another example, track 3. This is the famous football anthem, 3 Lions. For the author, this represents an early competitive group spirit found in youth football. Its mirror, track 9 by Bon Iver, represents the exact, literal opposite. It is the quiet, deeply necessary, solitary silence of adulthood. It is the intentional pause a person has to take to ensure their trauma isn't unknowingly passed on to the next generation. So you see, it is a highly deliberate, interlocking system. Every single song is a reflection of another, creating this deep, three-dimensional narrative rather than just a flat, boring timeline.
Section 1. Auditory Architecture of Liberation. Let's move to and see how this builds geographically, because the author's journey is marked by distinct, sweeping physical and emotional shifts that actually give this whole musical architecture its shape. It starts at age 11 and 12, At this time, the author's family structure back in Germany began to fracture, ultimately leading to their parents' separation. This was a critical, extremely painful era of vulnerability. It is the chaotic, messy foundation upon which the rest of this entire life map is built. But as they grew up, instead of turning inward and closing off from the world, their world expanded significantly. By age 17 and 18, they literally moved across the globe to the vast expanses of Canada. And this wasn't just some brief fun vacation, it profoundly broadened their personal horizons. It led to the formation of deep, enduring bonds with a host family, which proved to them that family could be something chosen, not just biological. Then, right after high school, at age 19 and 20, we see another massive geographic jump. They traveled to Israel to volunteer in a children's hospital. This shift, from the quiet forests of Germany to the intense, meaningful, culturally rich environment of the Middle East, profoundly shaped their entire understanding of humanity, of public service, and of community. Finally, we arrive at the present day, where the author is based in Palma de Mallorca, Spain, actively building a visionary future project called the Rorreal Skate Camp. So, this physical journey, from the total breakdown of a childhood home to the intentional, deliberate creation of a brand new global home, is the exact step-by-step emotional journey that is mapped by the manifesto.
Section 2. Childhood Trauma and Transsurfing.
And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast at the heart of this project. Consider track 1, which is a song by Disserstar called Familien Chronic, which translates to Family Chronicle. This track serves as the absolute anchor for the heavy inherited trauma of the past. The author recounts a deeply, deeply poignant memory here. They talk about standing entirely alone right after their high school graduation, just feeling completely, utterly isolated, while everyone else around them was celebrating, hugging their relatives, and taking photos. But then, in that moment of profound loneliness, a classmate named Felicitas Butt noticed this isolation. Naturally, and without a single second of hesitation, she just walked over and brought the author to her own family's table. Just one person saying, "Hey, come sit with us," became an absolute lifeline. It was this beautiful gesture of unforced connection that literally rewired how the author viewed human relationships going forward. Now, put that on the left side of your mental scale, and let's look at the right side. This stands in stark contrast to its mirror, track 11, also by the artist Disserstar, but this track is titled Siamo Tutti. While track 1 is all about the raw pain of the biological family and private, quiet isolation, track 11 represents a chosen global family. It is a loud, unapologetic, highly empowered anthem of global solidarity and active anti-fascism. It signifies the conscious, deliberate break from inherited toxic patterns. It's the act of replacing the quiet isolation of the past with a massive, interconnected community that loudly and proudly stands up for one another. During that initial, highly chaotic period of family breakdown back at age 11 and 12, something incredibly unique happened. A book called Transsurfing by an author named Vadim Zeland mysteriously appeared in the author's life. And what is genuinely fascinating here, and the author is very honest about this in the source text, is that they note they didn't actually sit down and read the whole philosophical book back then. In fact, they only truly opened it up and digested it recently as an adult. But merely the physical presence of this book in their childhood home, and the early basic discovery of its core concepts, served as a profound intellectual anchor. When they finally did read it cover to cover as an adult, they realized within just a few pages that this book perfectly mirrored the reality they had been living all along. You see, the concept of transsurfing is largely about recognizing negative energy, which the book refers to as pendulums, and actively, consciously choosing not to engage with them. It provided a subconscious framework for survival. It was a vital mental tool to navigate the emotional wreckage of family trauma, to somehow detach from the swirling negativity of a messy divorce, and to begin building an independent, self-determined worldview, even while they were still just a vulnerable child trying to figure things out.
Section 3. ADHD, Sports, and Skateboarding. So as we get into the middle of the manifesto, the source material meticulously maps specific tracks to the daily, exhausting, never-ending management of ADHD. If you can try to imagine the erratic, hyperactive chaos of a mind with ADHD, just 1,000 thoughts firing off all at once, you can really start to understand why music becomes an absolute necessary grounding tool. Look at track 6, Burial's Archangel. This sits at the exact mathematical center of the 11-track manifesto. It's the core. It is the central anchor bridging the author's past with their present creative processing. Burial's music is famous for being moody, repetitive, highly syncopated, and atmospheric. For the author, it symbolizes the daily, constant fight for focus and clarity, a struggle they literally face every single day in the loud, dusty, physically demanding environment of their work as a carpenter. The music acts as a metronome for an erratic mind. It keeps the beat when the brain wants to race. Then we look at track 5, Moderat's A New Era. This track documents the author's formative years living in Berlin. That's where they forged a brand new identity heavily rooted in the underground skateboarding scene. And speaking of skateboarding, look at track 8, Dark Chismaz Obsession Killer. This track specifically addresses navigating internal pressure. It frames skateboarding not just as a fun weekend hobby you do with your buddies, but as an absolute essential refuge. The skate park became a physical and mental space where the intense, overwhelming, obsessive pressure of ADHD could be actively transformed. It was channeled into something positive, physically exhausting, and ultimately profoundly freeing.
Now, to ground all of this heavy, complex psychological mapping, the author pulls a quote from the famous, highly charismatic German football manager Jürgen Klopp. The quote is simple: "I am just the normal one from the Black Forest." Now, you have to appreciate the wonderful bit of irony here. The author has constructed this highly complex 33-track symphonic mirrored architecture of their own psyche, and yet at the end of the day, they claim to just be a normal guy. But honestly, that humility is exactly the point they're trying to make. This ties all the way back to track 3, which, if you remember, is a football anthem reflecting the author's early, simpler days playing at a youth club under an inspiring coach. It also ties to track 10, the track of moving forward into the future. The crucial point the author emphasizes over and over is that despite having this grand, conceptual manifesto, they absolutely do not see themselves as a healer. They aren't a life coach, they aren't a guru trying to sell you a course, and they certainly don't see themselves as a savior. They describe themselves simply as someone who loves to talk, loves to connect with people, and wants to share their personal history. They are just a normal person using this highly structured musical format to process their messy life. Their only hope is that by putting it out there into the world, it might resonate, and it might just provide a little bit of comfort to others who are out there navigating their own daily chaos.
Section 4. Global Horizons and Solidarity.
The source text goes into detail about two major international experiences that completely shattered and reshaped the author's local worldview. First, at age 17, the author traveled all the way to Canada. As we mentioned earlier, this wasn't just a trip, it resulted in deep, enduring bonds with a Canadian host family. And those are bonds that persist strongly to this exact day. Then, at 19, they traveled to Israel to volunteer in a children's hospital. Now, this period was deeply, fundamentally transformative. Assisting young, vulnerable, sick patients day to day naturally evolved into something bigger. It evolved into personal invitations to people's homes, sharing intimate meals, and going out to local concerts. It taught the author the profound, grounding fulfillment that comes from directly helping others. During this time, they also discovered something amazing. They realized that the local skate and club scenes acted as a universal language. Think about it. You don't necessarily need to speak the same native tongue. You don't need to be perfectly fluent in Hebrew or Arabic or German if you both inherently understand how to do a kickflip, or if you both love the exact same techno music. Through these scenes, they built a massive global network. They even traveled around Israel with a friend from home, a guy named Johannes Schurmeister. Johannes was so deeply inspired by what he saw on that trip that he actually later returned to do international volunteer work himself. It's an amazing ripple effect. And this beautifully illustrates how the author's chosen global family completely transcends any lines on a map. It's built entirely from the ground up on shared inspiration, mutual support, and a shared soundtrack.
Section 5. The Streisand Effect.
So the crucial point we are moving to now introduces a fascinating conceptual core of the manifesto. It deals with institutional pressure and activism, but it's viewed through the lens of a very specific sociological phenomenon known as the Streisand Effect. By definition, the Streisand Effect is what happens when an attempt to censor, hide, or legally remove information inadvertently causes that exact information to spread massively. If you've never heard the origin story of this term, it's actually quite funny, and it perfectly illustrates the concept. Back in 2003, the famous entertainer Barbra Streisand sued a photographer. She wanted to force him to remove an aerial photo of her massive California mansion from a publicly available database. Now, this database was just meant for documenting coastal erosion. It wasn't a tabloid. Before her massive lawsuit, that specific photo had been downloaded exactly 6 times. Literally 6 times. But after the news of her massive lawsuit broke, as she tried to legally hide it, the internet did what the internet does. The photo was viewed over 420,000 times in a single month. The attempt to hide the information was the exact fuel that spread it. The author uses this objective, mechanical reality to explain their entire worldview on free speech and resistance. When powerful systems try to push marginalized voices down, especially in our modern digital age, those voices don't disappear. They predictably explode in visibility. To really drive this home, the source text provides 3 distinct real-world examples to illustrate how this mechanic actually functions in society. First, there's a national case in Germany. The rapper Danger Dan and the classical pianist Igor Levit had a scheduled appearance canceled on the satirical television show ZDF Die Anstalt. The institutional attempt by the network to pull the performance didn't quiet the artists down. Instead, it resulted in a massive viral explosion of media reach for them online. Everyone wanted to know what was canceled. Second, they look at an international corporate case from 2008. The lawyers for the incredibly powerful Swiss bank Julius Baer tried to use a heavy-handed legal injunction to block certain documents from being hosted on Wikipedia. The resulting media outcry didn't hide the documents, it did the exact opposite. It put the bank's actions and the documents themselves on the front pages of newspapers worldwide. Finally, the author points to the organization Breaking the Silence. This is a group where veteran Israeli soldiers speak publicly about their deployments. The text notes neutrally that attempts by state or institutional bodies to censor or quiet these critical voices only serve to make their megaphone larger. The strict reporting of the source material here shows a clear pattern. In the digital age, the heavy pressure applied to silence any group is the exact, literal mechanism that guarantees their message will be heard globally. It's a fascinating dynamic.
So how does this all tie back to the music? Well, the author connects this mechanical reality of the Streisand Effect directly back to track 11, Siamo Tutti. If you recall, this track represents the author's active anti-fascist stance and their deep, ongoing connection to friends in the Israeli club and skate scene who are doing similar advocacy work. According to the source material, the author views resistance and solidarity as living, breathing forces that behave exactly like the Streisand Effect. They absolutely cannot be diminished by institutional pressure, censorship, or intimidation. It just doesn't work. Instead, when faced with fierce headwinds, this community's strength, their relevance, and their interconnectedness only grow exponentially stronger. It's basic physics for social movements. The harder you push down on the community, the louder and more defiant their anthem becomes.
Section 6, Rorreal, a visionary future.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing how all of this theory becomes reality. We get to look at how the author is taking all of this heavy past trauma, all of this global networking, and these sociological realizations, and actively, physically channeling them into a tangible future plan. This is the Rorreal Skate Camp project, which is based in Palma de Mallorca. The project is built on 3 distinct, solid pillars. Step 1, the name. Rorreal is simply the phrase La Error spelled backward. This is a direct, deliberate reference to Moderat's track 5, A New Error. As we discussed, that is the very song that defined the author's identity-forging years skating in the streets of Berlin. It's all connected. Step 2, the inspiration. The visual and conceptual collage for this camp project incorporates heavy, powerful, symbolic elements. It features Salvador Dalí representing surrealism, the power of the subconscious mind, and the necessity of constantly shifting your perspective on reality. It also features Rosa Parks, serving as an absolute, unmovable symbol of resistance against oppression and the demand for basic human dignity. Step 3, the community. The project is deeply, painfully personal. It purposefully honors late friends, who are referred to in the text as Jordan and Till. It turns their memory into permanent, lasting emotional anchors for the physical project, standing alongside living friends like the Ferrari-Mann Tarek. The Rorreal Skate Camp isn't just a place to skate. It is the physical location where all the manifesto's complex, winding threads beautifully converge. It is the ultimate act of taking past trauma and transforming it into a vibrant, living, breathing, international culture project.
But here is the thing. The 11-track manifesto doesn't just abruptly stop at 11. An interlocking system, by its very nature, requires a bridge to the future. That bridge is track 12, MCNZI's The Funk. The author specifically notes that MCNZI is an artist who aggressively, constantly refuses to be boxed into any single genre. They move fluidly and chaotically between electronic, hip-hop, pop, and punk. You can't pin them down. And this track breaks all the boundaries and sonic expectations that were so carefully set by the previous 11 songs. It stands isolated, it's loud, and it is incredibly powerful right at the end of the sequence. It symbolizes the ultimate human freedom. The ability to finally break away from your own inherited family chronicle, to categorically refuse rigid societal norms, and to forge a completely new, fluid identity that is no longer defined by the trauma of your past. It's also a testament to the real-world network the author built over the years, as MCNZI and the photographer Stefan Grapp actually visited the author's friend in Israel during that pivotal volunteer year. So the funk acts as the very first track of the next segment of the larger 33-track manifesto. It leads right into an entirely new phase of discovery.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We have journeyed through a truly remarkable concept today. We've seen how a highly structured playlist isn't just background noise, but can serve as a profound system of psychological reflections. We've watched how it can literally take the sheer chaos of family breakdown, the exhausting daily reality of ADHD, and the expansive thrill of global exploration, and turn it all into a coherent, deeply powerful narrative.
The author of this manifesto didn't just passively survive their history, they actively mapped it. They analyzed it song by song, beat by beat, emotion by emotion. And now they're using the very blueprint of their survival as the concrete foundation to build a welcoming global community in Mallorca. It's a masterclass in intentional living. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder as you go about your day. When you look back at the tracks of your own life, the difficult, quiet moments of isolation, the chaotic moments of change, and the loud triumphs of connection, how will you transform the architecture of your past into a blueprint for your future? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.